Yep, it's recording.
Okay.
Joni, can you send that? I'm sorry, Joni, can you send that link to Renata, please?
Yes, I'll be glad
Thank
to.
you.
Okay, thank you all for coming and joining us for lunch today. We have a very exciting panel, our Dad Cave, that's going to present today. We're having a little bit, some IT issues. We're going to keep working on that behind the scenes. But for now, I want to go ahead and open it up and introduce Alan Carson. He is the moderator for today, and I'm just going to go ahead and turn it over to him, and he can help with the introductions and everything else. Thank you, Alan.
Awesome. Good to be with everybody today. And my camera will be going on and off as I let people in, but you can hear me. And so I'm just glad you're with us. We have 4 dads who are joining us today, and they're going to share a little bit about their story and their experiences. And as we're parents raising kids, whether they're kids still in our home or they're adult children, we're still navigating that journey together. And so they're just going to share some things with us. And so Jay and Cody and Kirk and Keelan and I are going to do that. And the way we're going to get started is I just want to share a little bit about me, and then I'm going to let them introduce themselves. And the way we're going to do that is just to tell us who we are, a little bit about our journey with our kid, and then with our child, and then I wanted to share one thing they enjoy doing for fun. And let me say this too: if you're not speaking, if you go ahead and mute your mic, that would help us, and that would help us. That just helps the etiquette in case there's background noise or whatever. So, but glad you're with us. So I'm Alan Carson. I'm a United Methodist pastor out here in El Reno, and a consultant with the Evolution Foundation. I have a family member. I was a child of a mother who had schizophrenia. I'm foster care alum, and I raised my own kids who was struggling with some behavioral health, mental health challenges. And then substance abuse disorders and mental illness are things that are just a part of our family's journey. And so I'm just glad to be here with these guys and to hear their stories, help them to share that with us today. So I'm going to ask Kirk if you'd go.
Yeah, my name's Kirk Morrison. I'm retired from the construction industry. My wife and I live just north of Edmond. We have 2 adult children, and grandson number 2 is on the way. Struggles with my son's substance use disorder brought me to Parents Helping Parents and other support groups. So I'm looking forward to sharing my hope and experience with everybody on the call today. Thanks for having me.
Awesome. Thank you, Kirk. Cody, you want to go next?
Sure. I'm Cody Toney. First and foremost, I'm a father of 2 boys, Connor and Cruz. Cruz has severe ADHD. Connor has autism, and with that comes anxiety and depression. So we're dealing with that currently. He's 15 now. He was diagnosed at 3. But my wife and I started a nonprofit organization here in Poto, Oklahoma. For those of you who don't know, that's the far eastern side. We're as close to Arkansas as you can get. And we help families in eastern Oklahoma with resources and finding the things that they need for family members with disabilities. We're supposed to share something we enjoy. Behind me, you can see my two things, music and sports memorabilia, specifically the Royals.
All right, another Kansas City team. All right, good. Fantastic. Thank you, Cody. Yeah, I forgot to say something I enjoyed doing for fun, and Kirk probably ought to tell us too. I love messing with cars, just about anything to do with them. So it's a fun thing. Kirk, you want to tell us?
Well, fun for me is going to be traveling in my RV with my wife and going to national parks. That's kind of our passion. So thanks.
Awesome. Thanks, guys. Keelan, you want to go next?
Sure, no problem. My name is Keelan Miller. I'm a husband, father of three. We were foster parents to our oldest for about 5 years before we went ahead with adoption. We dealt with, the developmental issues for him that he dealt with stemming from some prenatal drug abuse and alcohol and situations like that. And so it was a struggle, and I'm looking forward to getting to be on this panel and hear other stories and share more as well. Something that I like to do, I would have to say coaching. I currently coach youth sports. I've did my bid in high school and middle school sports as well. Kind of found that it's a little more fun when you're doing it for free with the youth. So glad to be here. Thanks for having me.
Awesome, Keelan. Thank you so much, man. And finally, Jay.
Yeah, Jay Bruce, again, glad to be here on the panel and get to know the other dads better and share a little bit about my life and experience. I'm married to Joni Bruce. She's known as the legend. Everyone recognizes her work at OFN, but we have 3 children. Courtney Ellen Bruce is our oldest daughter. Born in 1992, wonderful daughter, but during middle school and the first couple of years of high school, boy, she had some really difficult years with anxiety, depression, some mental health issues. But happy to say that by junior and senior year of high school, things were so much better, and she was soaring and went on to college. She's now married. Her husband's just finishing up his med school, looking to go to a residency, but she still has some issues with anxiety. Our second child, John Cameron Bruce, born in 1997, was born with a genetic illness, disease called polycystic kidney disease. He lived in the Integris NICU for 55 days. And then after we'd exhausted all medical options and nothing really was working, we made the difficult decision to turn the ventilator off for him. And our last act as parents for him was to hold him as he died. Our son, well, we back up. Out of that event, we got connected with some other parents who were going through the NICU experience. Joni became the executive director of the fledgling organization, the Neonatal Parents Network, which has now become the Oklahoma Family Network. Because John Cameron had a genetic disease, both Joni and I are 1 in 10,000 people that carry the recessive gene. We decided not to have any more children of our own, but we adopted our third child, Christopher Bruce, in 1998. Again, Chris is a great son. But he has learning disabilities, mainly around central auditory processing disorders, which made school really difficult for him, delayed reading and speech. But today, he's a firefighter at Oak Cliff Fire Station north of Edmond, and he's moving on. So that's just to give a time frame to say that I'm somewhat removed in terms of years from the heat of all of the issues, the day-to-day issues, but I still remember well all the emotions, the fear, the anxiety, the frustrations, fatigue. So hopefully I can still contribute something worthwhile. What do I like to do for fun? I have a man cave where I like to retreat for solitude and reading and study. But with Joni, we both like to watch the British mystery television series. So that's our sort of escape time. So again, thanks for letting me participate.
Awesome. Thanks, Jay. Appreciate that. Awesome. And so I have some questions I'm going to just help us start with. And then I would say to those who are with us today, If you're watching and you have a question or whatever, I want to invite you to share that in the chat with us, and we'll try to answer those, or at least discuss them, kick them around before we're done. But I'm going to get us started. Like I said, if something that you want to ask further or something you're thinking about, feel free to do that, and we'll do that. Hopefully we'll have a little bit of time even where you can ask yourself on camera if you want to share something about it too. So glad for that. So one of the things that we talked about the other day as we prepared for this time together was just that, for dad, sometimes we struggle to talk about our feelings that we have. And the reality is, when you have a child with special needs with some kind of behavioral health challenge, whether it's some kind of mental health disorder, a substance abuse disorder, it changes it can affect the expectations that you've had. And sometimes there's other things that kind of go along with that. And one of the things that we talked about individually was that sometimes it's easier, or that our spouses sometimes found it easier to talk about how they were feeling than maybe we did. And so I just want to invite you guys just to share a little bit about, and either the four of you can jump in. I don't have that scripted, but what were some of the feelings that you felt around that when it kind of came apparent that your child was going to have some special needs, and it was going to make things look different?
Well, I could comment on that. When my wife and I found out our son was struggling with drug abuse, at first we were a little shell shocked, kind of didn't know what to do. We tended to isolate early on, trying to process the shame and guilt we felt, why our son, playing the what if game or blame game. Why is our child suffering through this? What do we do as parents? And, it was that stigma that kind of kept us sick also. And finally, for me, those feelings, frustration of, how to proceed, where are these resources? Who's going to help us through this process? So for me, accepting there was a problem, and then having a willingness to reach out for help, that professional care for ourselves and for our son. So, thanks.
I think with me, it was, it started with the autism diagnosis at 3, and I'm probably not any different than any other dad. I went through the denial. In fact, a lot of people are surprised to hear that I went through denial for about 2 years before I even accepted that I don't know as much as this expert who has a piece of paper saying that there is a diagnosis, So, but I wanted, like everybody else, I wanted somebody who could play sports like I did and do the things that I do. And it took a long time to get past that and say, hey, even though he's not going to do those things, he's amazing once you put that all aside. So, but yeah, denial was the main thing. And then it was, okay, once I put that aside, what can I do to help him? And man, doors just kept opening and opening. And so that's kind of why I do what I do.
Well, I'll jump in here. In the order of our children that we had to walk through the hard times, John Cameron was the first. And you get the diagnosis of probably a terminal illness, and you have to absorb it first. It's difficult to absorb when you're in the hospital on the maternity wing, and you see all these families coming in and going with their newborns, and seem to be the only family going in through the special doors into the NICU. So that creates its own grief because things are probably not going to be what you had hoped for. And then just dealing with all the medical decisions can be overwhelming. and just dealing with the range of emotions, because it's hard to interpret a lot of the medical things going on. We might see one thing and interpret it in a positive way, but it really took the neonatal physicians to explain what we were seeing and put it more in a way we could understand. So you're going up and down emotionally with the our other children. So we were farther down the road in terms of just knowledge, having understanding about resources. Really, Joni had learned a great deal about some mental health issues and learning disabilities. But even though, we had perhaps a level of knowledge of resources that others might have, you're still got to deal with it. And that has its own range of issues, and I can well remember, again, the thoughts of, this is not how we thought it would be. It is hard. And particularly, this is not a comment on people who do this, just an observation. Joni and I used to get these Christmas letters from various friends, and every Christmas letter seemed to say about how well their children were doing in school and college. And we're looking at each other like, yeah, okay, that's great for them, but it doesn't help us feel any better. And likely those families have issues too. But all you hear are the positives, and you begin to think, my gosh, life is so hard. And you just have to kind of work through those types of issues and find new ways of relating inside the family, new ways of finding joy, activities that your children can join in, and set aside all the things that you hope you might do with your children or see them do, but you can also see some amazing things that you never expected they would do too. So it's just an up and down and range of emotions. So that's kind of my viewpoint.
And I'll jump in real quick. My wife and I were young parents, and we were dealing with behavior issues. And something that was a big challenge with that was kind of deciding the difference between, just a kid with normal bad behavior versus what is the disability that we're dealing with. And so, and being new parents, that there was a lot that we learned, and there was a lot of struggle for us. And I mean, parent teacher conference nights at school were a disaster for us. And kind of like you, Mr. Bruce, we saw other parents coming out and it was all smiles and good grades and not so much for us. And it took many, many years, before we saw and got the level of maturity that we were looking for. And so, we always encourage just hang in there and stay in the grind, and eventually it'll start to change and grow for you. So that's kind of.
Awesome. Thank you, guys. Absolutely. I'm thinking about my son who had a learning disability, had dysgraphia and some mild dyslexia and all that kind of stuff. And I remember just in first grade when he had a half an hour of reading every night you were supposed to do, and our half an hour could take 4 days, it felt like. And one page he got a word, the next page would be the same word, and he couldn't get it. And then anyway, it's pretty tough. And so as a dad, it was and I'm a fixer, and so it's really hard to do that. And so really the next question that kind of leads into that is then where did you go for help? Because and that's really, we joke about men, we'll drive around for 5 hours and go down the same road because we don't want to ask for directions or ask for help, right? And so but one of the things we were talking about, how important that was when we finally reached out. And so the question I want us to kind of talk about is how'd you do that, or where'd you go to, where'd you find support, And where'd you find that connection to kind of help pull you out of that shell and maybe help you know you're not a three-headed monster. You're not just because it doesn't look like everybody else's, you know, or I love what Kirk was saying earlier. One of the questions that you ask a lot of times is, what do we do? Was there some way we parented, or was there something we didn't? What did we miss in the midst of all that? So where did you go to get that kind of support that kind of pulled you out of that?
I'll start with my wife drugged me almost literally to a parent support group meeting of other families that were going through the same stuff. It was a group of parents it wasn't even really organized. It was just parents that decided they wanted to get together and talk about their kids with autism. Fortunately, there was one mom who felt like she needed to share her information with everybody else, and she was a counselor in the area, and she said, let's get together and talk. And I thought, I don't want to do this. I mean, why do I want to go to this? I was still kind of in that denial stage, even a little bit. And once we got there, and I just sat back and listened for the first few minutes and realized that I wasn't alone, and that they were sharing, and I kept thinking, that sounds just like Connor. That sounds just like Connor, and as we got through that's what kind of helped me realize that I needed help, he needed help, and then other people needed help. So
my experience with my son's substance use disorder is our family started meeting with a licensed drug and alcohol counselor. It was kind of our starting point for our recovery as parents and for our son. And the counselor recommended resources for our son and for us. I'll second what Cody was saying. Support groups, regardless of what you're dealing with, surround yourself with others that have either gone through or currently going through the same process and trials. I joke, one meeting I attend is a 12-step group, and we donate $1 at each meeting. And I say it's the cheapest therapy in town. So I've gone several years, and I've always come back after every meeting recharged, and I've learned something new from those type of support group meetings. So thank you.
For us, a lot of the people in our support circle, so to speak, disabilities and mental health issues weren't, especially back when we were a lot younger, those weren't things that were acknowledged or understood, so to speak. So a lot of the advice and guidance that we would get the pickings were slim in what we decided to actually use or not use. And so, for us, it was more so, conferences like this or just readings, articles, just continuing to gain understanding about what we're working with. And at the same time, to keep continuing to get to know our son and continue to learn to love him, because, he was a foster child as well. So, and we just stuck to the grind in that way. So that's kind of how we dealt with it.
Yeah, I think for us, thinking now particularly about Ellen and Christopher, Joni was developing a pretty good knowledge base about issues and resources. So we got Ellen and really us as parents into some counseling for the mental health issues, and physicians, with medications that would be appropriate. And again, you have to absorb all that and be willing to say, there's chemical issues here or medical issues, and kind of get over the stigma of mental health and medications to help treat that. With respect to Chris, Joni knew some amazing people that could help him learn how to read, just get his letters down, because got a form of dyslexia, and his eyes don't track, normally because of how one of his eyes was formed. Um, and certainly for me, I've got a few close friends that have been in tough times too, not necessarily the same, but certainly difficult times, who could come alongside and just encourage and say, keep moving forward. Make the best decisions you can make with the information you have, and keep walking ahead, and don't beat yourself up about things that you can't change, or second guess, what you do. It's real easy to look back in hindsight and say, oh, we should have done this, or we should have done that. And we still grapple perhaps with issues like that. And it's real hard when you have kids with special needs, particularly learning disabilities, to know what's the right balance between helping and hindering through your help. When do you let your kids fail? That's real hard. I've never really figured out the balance there, because you don't want to see your kids fail. Sometimes it's good for them, but because they're struggling more so than the other kids even just to have a level playing field, you always tend to want to step in and help out. I mean, that's kind of the dad's perspective, and I suspect the mom's perspective too. And certainly pastoral help. I think you really got to pay attention to the emotional side, the spiritual side. At least for me, all those help in this kind of nebulous understanding of resilience. Okay, how do you just stay in the fight? And you can't do it like John Wayne. you gotta have your buddies around and your support group.
Alan, can I add to that a little bit?
You betcha, Cody.
So what Jay just said, I say in a lot of my trainings, I want my son to fail. And I know people kind of look at me funny when I say that, but if you think about how many times we have failed in life and how many times we've persevered because of that failure, we want our kids to be as independent as possible, or at least interdependent. And that's a factor that we have to put out there. We have to let them fail at certain things for a couple of reasons. But one is just to know how far they really can go, because sometimes we have expectations or lack of expectations for our kids, and until we see how far they can really go, you really don't know. So but I also wanted to add to, the support groups are great, but in addition to that, I listen to a lot of our therapists, our occupational therapists, our speech therapists, those experts that work with other people every day, and learn because they'll also tell you that, oh, I've got another kid that is like this, or so you also realize that you're not alone in that sense too, and that they can give you some good advice.
I remember with our son, one of the challenges that we had, and being a pastor where we move, is moving my son into different schools. And some schools are better equipped and better supportive, better prepared to help a parent, help a family, whatever that challenge is. So whether you got a child who's wrestling with some kind of mental health disorder, or a learning disability, or anxiety, or if they're experimenting with substance or finding their way into that realm too. There are just some that find their way more supportive and less stigmatizing and less shaming. And so when it started, with our son, we didn't have any idea what to do. As a kid growing up the way I did, I didn't always have great advocates. And so I didn't really get to see that, how to advocate as a parent. And so grateful for my wife who did a lot of that. But we had a pastor friend in a neighboring town, and his wife was a special ed teacher. And so she really helped us ask some of the right questions towards getting them the help they needed in those early days, and helping us better understand what our rights were as parents in the school system, and requiring the schools to make the appropriate accommodations and the appropriate stuff to help our kids. And so really was empowering, because I think in the beginning, when you're just struggling, you feel very disempowered. But when you when you find some other folks along the journey, and begin to learn that, it's just, anyway, it's helpful, not to feel so disempowered. So, so a lot about our kids, about our own process, but part of really keeping our families strong and healthy is really taking care of our marriage. And so one of the things we talked about the other day was about that. So the question is, what are some things that you all have done to help strengthen your marriage through this time? What are some of the things that you all have done to help? Because if you don't let it go, I mean, if you let it go, then and you don't take care of it, it'll be like a plant or a flower; it'll wilt on us. So, what are the things that you did to help to strengthen that? Where did you find support to do that?
Some of the things we did when we could is intentional dating, and we made sure that date night happened. And it's gotten a lot easier now that the kids are older. It's a little bit easier to make those happen on a regular basis. Always, trying to keep God first and just enjoying the time that we do have together, because once you have the kids, it's not a whole lot. And so it's kind of simple, just intentionally having a relationship is the easiest way I would say it.
Mhm. Yeah, for us, the time together is essential. We found, I think, one way that is helpful for us is taking walks. We used to do that a lot more than we do now, but from where we are in Edmond, we can walk to the center of UCO and back. It's about a 55-minute walk. And about the time we hit the pavement out our door, Joni starts to process talking. And by the time we get back, she's processed it all out. And it's just a way that she can recharge and think through issues. And I'm not there to really offer any sort of advice or fix it. I'm just listening as we walk along. And so that's just one thing that we do. Or just, again, spend time, whether it's just being physically close and sense of in the same room, watching the same TV show, at least you're together. You have to be intentional about that too, or it doesn't happen.
I think we're still trying to figure some of that stuff out, honestly. I mean, I'm with Jay. The fact that we're just together is nice, and I do try to listen. It took me a long time to realize that she doesn't want me to fix things, because like Alan said, we're fixers, but and just to listen. But once I realized that, then that was fine. I would be remiss if I didn't go back and talk a little bit about my wife is a good support for me as well, and I know that may even seem a little cheesy, but honestly, I always tell people she's the brains, I'm just the mouth. So all of her ideas are what I come, she comes up with the things, and then I go out and do the training. So she knows a lot more than I do about any of this. And so to bounce ideas off of her, as an advocate, she's my go-to on all of that, but also as just a support. When I get frustrated, when things get upsetting, I can go and tell her, and she's usually pretty open, depending on how her day went too. But she's pretty open about listening, and of course she tries to fix too, and sometimes that's not what I want, but we work it out. So
I think for my wife and I, just knowing that we had each other's back, that we were in this together, that we fortunately agreed for the most part how we were going to respond to our son's behavior and struggles with substance use. Just it's the simple things, being there, daily hugs, telling each other you love each other, and purposely spending some time every day focusing on your marriage, because I find when I talk to other parents that struggle with this, they're so hyper focused on the one child that struggles. They may disregard their other relationships with their other children. And as we talked about, our spouses, our marriages can be strained or suffered, and other relationships. So and I think it's just good to know that the wives know that we love them and support them, and we'll get through this together.
Yeah, I was gonna say, lots of my conversation with Catherine is about just, it's like comes down to the point to say, it's going to be okay. We're going to find a way to get through this. I mean, that kind of idea, we had a couple of sayings that we said, have said all along, one was that we'd always say Carsons aren't quitters. And so you just kind of hang in there. And then we'd say, as people of faith, God hadn't brought us this far to drop us now. So let's just keep going. And what I found, what we found in the two of us is that when one of us was really struggling, the other one was really strong, and it kind of flip-flopped at times. And so, so definitely grateful for that. And in our early, when our kids were young, pastoring two churches and go in Southern Oklahoma and going to school in Dallas and another state, I wasn't home a lot. And so finding time was really hard. I appreciated Cody saying, we're still trying to figure out how to do that. We've been married 2.5 decades, and we're still sometimes trying to figure out how to do that. But we also really like walking, like what Jay said. In fact, we did that last night. It was a beautiful night. Got out and walked a little bit, walked the dog with us, and then we did kind of spontaneous. Our kids are finally old enough. When they were little, it's hard to be spontaneous. It takes a whole lot more work. But as they get older, and we jumped in the car and just went and looked at Christmas lights. That was a fantastic thing. So just doing those kind of things really help to do that. All right. And so one of the other things that we talked about.
Hey, one other thing,
Jump in there,
as
Jay.
men, we can very often step out of the household and the issues of the day because we go to an office and work, where our wives don't always have that ability. And so I think part of, in the context of marriage and the spouse's need, wife's need, they need to be able to cultivate their own friends that can support them in a way that maybe I can't, as a part of a healthy support group. So, if your wife's had the hard duty all day long, and she says, I may go get a cup of coffee with a friend this evening. Guys need to step in and say, go on, go have a good time. I'll take care of the house, And so that's another way I think we can support our wives and just strengthen the marriage. Because again, we can't do it all for our wives, but other people can come around and do things that we can't do and pour into their lives things that we can't do. So we need to be able to foster that for them.
Absolutely. Excellent point, Jay. All right. I just have one more question in my initial kind of list here that I had put together for us. And, as we think about where we've been, that's important to reflect on that, where we've been. But what really gives us hope is the ability to see the future. And so, and we've hit on a little bit of that already, but what are the things that really give you hope? Hope either for your child, hope for your family, hope for you, hope for your marriage. What are the things that where you see that?
Well, Alan, I can chime in on that. In regards to my son, what gives me hope is to see him active in his recovery lifestyle and how he stays engaged in not only getting the proper care and support he needs, but he also is now reaching out to others that have struggled like himself, whether it be through sponsorship or mentoring, like a lot of us do in this group. So that gives me hope that even though we've had our struggles, the bright side is our experiences and our sharing can provide that hope and encouragement for others to move forward. So.
Mhm. I would echo Kirk there in terms of helping others. If you can see some value in the pain that you're experiencing and just in dealing with kids and with special health needs or disabilities, and you're making it through, and you can look back over your shoulder and you can see some parents just coming into that life circumstance and can help offer them a little encouragement or support. I think that goes a long way to our own hope. You know, we see that there's a way that we can take what is happening or happened to us and pour that back into somebody else's life and help them and kind of watch them grow and make progress. Again, for me, this personal sharing, you know, hope is all bound up in faith. And as a Christian, you know, I've got a hope that yes, there's trials and tribulations, but there's you know, God is overarchingly watching over and providing, comforting. And so I know the hard times will end ultimately, maybe slowly, but it will end. And I think that's true of most troubles and trials. They could go on for a very long time, but there is an ending to those things. And it, again, could happen all of a sudden. And you'd be surprised by the joy that comes when a trial is finally over. That may not be the same case with respect to kids with lifelong disabilities and or special health needs, because that hope may not be realized until way down the road. But again, an understanding that there is hope and there's purpose in every circumstance of life that makes you who you are, and all the people that pour into your lives. A friend of mine was sharing about something that Fred Rogers would say, Mr. Rogers. Sometimes you just need to step back and think about all the people that have loved you into being throughout all your circumstances, that they've loved you and they've helped form who you are today. And you ought to be thankful for that. And who are you helping to love and to become into being in terms of who they are and how they're moving forward? So we're bound up in a community of people that are engaged in struggles, but there's a lot of camaraderie, a lot of love that goes back and forth that help us, give us hope, I think.
I think we're kind of fortunate and maybe a little unique in that we have documented Connor's journey in blogs, communication notebooks, with his therapist, with his teachers over the years, just ways to communicate with the schools, and just journals or whatever, for whatever reason. And I think I would encourage that to anybody, especially, you know, what I call newly diagnosed parents, parents that have just received a diagnosis. Because what's been interesting is when you go back, it's kind of neat that Facebook kind of does this. If you've got Facebook, that, you know, they go back into the memories. But if you go back and look at where we were 5 years ago, even 3 years ago, even a year ago, and see that there is progress and there is, you know, we've come a long way from, you know, my son's 15 now. At 3, we were told he wouldn't walk, he wouldn't, he wouldn't talk, he wouldn't ride a bike, he'd never be in a mainstream classroom. And we've come a long way. He does all 3 of those things, because that gives me hope. And even though I don't realize it until, you know, I look back at those things, sometimes it is hope, and it is, we know we've come a long way. We really have. So I would encourage that.
Awesome stuff, guys. Awesome stuff. Yeah, absolutely. The idea of making sense out of it, that, when we're able to use the pain to help others and the progress. And um, I remember when Alex got his first job, and they thought he was a rock star, and he couldn't write very well. He worked for a car dealership, and he couldn't write very well. And his job was to take messages. And so they all nicknamed him Doc. And they turned a disability into a blessing. And I mean, it was awesome. So, I mean, just those kind of things, it's just awesome. So, yeah, I love the idea of thinking about progress and where you've been. Well, we've got a couple of questions in the chat, and one was targeted specifically for Keelan, but probably anybody could answer. It's about, about your childhood and how that has helped you as a father, raise, and parent. So sometimes, we learn things from our parents that we really appreciate and like, and then we also learn things and you go, I don't think I want to replicate that deal. And so, and I definitely, being a foster care alum, can echo some of that. But that question, I'll give you a chance, Keelan, if you want to answer that.
Sure. For me, as far as being a dad, in my childhood, I kind of grew up without that in my life, and so now being a dad, it's almost like you're trying to do something that you've never really seen done before, and so you're kind of pulling from resources from different areas of your life, whether it's a family member, a friend, or a mentor, wherever. You just kind of piece all these pieces together to help you figure out what works best for you. And I've always had a strong mom presence that I think I carry the ability to hold my kids accountable, and at the same time push them to their highest potential. And so those are kind of the biggest ways that my childhood has affected my parenting style.
Thank you.
That
Anybody
was
else
a
wanna-
great conversation, Alan, that you guys had the other evening, was kind of discussing that. And although I made that question directed at Keelan, you guys had some natural conversations about that. So although I addressed it to Keelan, I would open that up to some of the rest of you as well.
And one of the things that I said in that meeting, and I say this in all my trainings, are it was a little bit harder for me because my blueprint was my dad. My dad was strict military. You do what you're told when you're told. And when you come to a child on the spectrum who it takes a while to process information, that and I'd like to say that was in past tense, that was hard for me, but it's still hard for me, as I don't have the patience sometimes but I got that from my dad, and that was me watching him say, you do what you're told now, don't hesitate, don't wait, whatever. And while my dad was and still is an amazing man and an amazing dad, that blueprint doesn't work for me. So I had to rethink everything. I had to rethink the way I discipline, the way I love, even. It was always assumed that my dad, loved me. I always knew that, but it was never said. With my kids, it's different, And so all those things that you think you're going to be because of who you see, it's not always the way it works out. So.
Yeah. In my case, I had nothing to complain about in my childhood and growing up. Loving family, well provided for. But I had a father who wanted to connect with me in his world, which was, he is a banker, not that part of the world, but he was a painter. And he always wanted to connect in painting together. And that was just not my gift. And I had friends who told me, regarding my own kids, you got to figure out a way to step into their world. What do they enjoy doing? Get in the middle of that. And so we we're always pretty involved with our kids through their school ages. If Chris was in baseball, and that wasn't really his gift, but he wanted to try it, well, we were there at the games, rooting them on. Or if Ellen really began to blossom when she got into the drama department in high school. So you're there, you're helping build the sets, you're doing all the things that you're stepping into their world to connect with them and foster that relationship.
For me growing up, I never had the thought that my parents wouldn't be available for me. They were always a presence in my life. They were always home when I came home from school or other activities. So I've tried to model that, and I've learned with my son's struggles, it was crucial that I be present with him and in the moment, and listen to him, listen to learn, not listen to try to fix something, but just be a better listener, I think, was the value I'd learned. So thanks.
Thank you, guys. Thank you.
Hey, can I share something real quick? A mentor of mine, anybody that knows Jan Moss, a mentor of mine, I always think about what she says. Jan's amazing if you guys don't know her. But one of the things that she always shares is the only thing you have to do is love them. That's it. And I think that's something that I try to focus on every day. And sometimes, I'll be honest, sometimes that's harder. I mean, there are times when that's not the easiest thing to focus on, but she's right. That's all you have to do.
Cool.
Real
Thanks,
quick,
man.
I'd like to second Cody's statement. In recovery, my son shared this with me, and he said, knowing that my wife and I had unconditional love and support for him, helped him through his darkest times. Just a little nugget of hope, and was very powerful for him in his recovery. I just wanted to share that. It just kind of popped into my head. So thanks.
Awesome. Well, Kelly Lingo posted in the chat that she's got a question or two, and so I'm going to invite her just to ask one of those.
Okay, yeah, we're kind of short on time, but that's okay. I'm a provider, but also was a caregiver. My kids are grown and adults now, but as a provider and working with families that I work with, nowadays it's fathers, grandfathers, uncles, brothers, all of them are raising kids, right? So how do we get the dad that's has the stigma or is in denial to try to jump on board with the diagnosis that the doctor has said or the medicine that the doctors have said? How would you go about having a conversation with them on that? Any of you?
Good question.
I can chime in on that. I was at a meeting last night and this very topic came up, and the person running that meeting said, good things happen to families that follow the professionals' advice, and better outcomes for families if you'll follow, if your loved one and the family will follow the professionals' input, not letting either the family or the loved one blow up the process. I think it's very important. So thanks. Also,
Yeah.
also a lot of my dads show their emotions through anger sometimes or control. So it's believe in the process, I would say.
Right, which in turn trickles down to the child.
Yes, I mean, once my wife and I started following our own recovery, kind of unintended consequences, but our son started getting better. He learned he could not manipulate us anymore. Couldn't play mom off of dad, and that kind of rabbit hole conversation you get.
Yeah. I heard a gentleman speak at one of the OFN conferences, one of the higher management at, I think, Walgreens or one of the pharmacies, and they had a son who was born with autism. And he said something to the effect of, you know, when the map doesn't match the terrain, you got to go with the terrain. Meaning, if you have a dad that thinks he's got a game plan and he's gonna implement it and it's gonna work, if it's not the right for the whatever the terrain is, you got to adapt it. And so he needs to get kind of real about, you've got a son with autism or whatever it may be, and all that everything you mapped out, you're going to have to kind of move that aside and now start dealing with the terrain you're in. It's kind of a military metaphor. When the map doesn't match the terrain, you got to go with the terrain because that's what you're dealing with, you know.
And I think what I tell professionals usually that talk to me is number one, not what you want to hear, Kelly, but until you get the parent on board, there's not a whole lot I can do to help. But with that, I think it goes back to how we got started, which was just going and knowing that somebody else is going through those things. So if you can find somebody that will share that with them. Now, there's a fine line though in sharing and one-upping. And we do have some parents that are like, well, but this has happened to me and this happened. And that's not what people want to hear. They just want to hear that you're going through the same things. And then you let them share with them. And that's hard to do. And you got to figure out the balance on that.
We're almost straight up at 1 o'clock. So we have had some wonderful comments in the chat room, thanking our panelists for being so vulnerable and opening up and sharing your stories and your ideas and supporting each other. We want to thank you graciously for being here and doing this. And for the rest of the participants, know this evening, there should be an email that goes out that's going to have a very short survey, 4 questions. If you could please complete that survey and send it back in. And if you want to be put in contention for one of the door prizes, you can check a little box. It's all anonymous until you check the box. We won't know what you've said on the survey, but your name will go into the drawing. And we ask that all of you please complete that survey. And thank you so much for spending this hour with us. And a wonderful rest of your day. And hopefully to see you at 3 and then again at 7.
Jerry, there was one question about if there's any men's support groups available that they might know of and that they could share.
I don't know any specifically for men, no.
Sometimes you can find a men's group at a church. That's a good place to go sometimes. So I would be checking Chuck Fletcher if he's still on here. Maybe he'd help us out.
Yeah. You might touch base with OFN, you know, if they've got supporting men to help mentor. They may have access to one-on-one type of mentorship that could blossom into something more.
Thank you all very much. Great. Hope you have a blessed day.
And same to you.
Thanks,
for
Alan.
participating.
Thank you, guys.
Can we please stop the recording?
I will. Just one moment. Maybe. Yeah. Maybe.